Thank you for joining the Thaiger and Lawyers, Guns and Money as we look at the many different legal things that you may confront whilst you're here in Thailand. And our guest is from Integrity Legal. You can type that into your Google machine and you'll be able to speak to Ben Hart.
Good to see you again, Tim.
Thanks, Ben, for coming in. Let's have a talk about embassies, the role of embassies for foreigners. Now, of course, we see the movies,
Sure.
and we've got the car chase going, and the person being chased by the local constabulary rushes into the embassy, just makes it in on the as the door closes behind them, and they're safe. That's about all most of us know about what embassies do in foreign countries, but I don't think that actually happens.
Not very much that I've heard of, at least
No.
not in the last probably 40 years.
Do you know, in 10 years, I've been to the Australian Embassy once, and that was a guest for a function. I wasn't even there as an Australian citizen.
Yeah, I was. I've been to the embassy quite a little bit. Not so much recently. We deal with it a lot by correspondence for obvious reasons under present circumstances. But
Who's got the best embassy in Thailand? The American one's pretty swish, isn't it?
it's pretty big. It's big, but it's very utilitarian.
Right.
I would say.
The British had a very nice one. That's been
Well, I'll tell you,
knocked
the
over.
Portuguese embassy down on the river,
Oh.
because that's the one that goes all the way. I think it was the first accredited diplomatic mission in Thailand. It's pretty sweet. Like when you look down on it from the major hotels down there, it's like, wow, that's pretty cool that it's just right there.
My embassy's better than
Yeah,
yours.
well, yeah.
So what is the role of embassies, and when do we need them as a foreigner or expat?
Well, you need to delineate kind of the two sides. I always kind of think of it as the embassy side, which is the diplomatic side, and then the consular side, which is what a foreigner is going to deal with day to day.
Passports and...
Yeah, visas. The embassy side, the diplomatic side, just to set that aside, is, that's essentially that government talking to this government. That's all it's doing. You're not ever going to deal with those folks. Probably not, and if you are, you might have some bigger issues.
Or get a suit.
Yeah, definitely get a suit, definitely a tie. Now, the consular section, now that's a horse of a different color. I've dealt with a lot of stuff in what's called American Citizen Services, as well as the visa unit. And there are big misconceptions I've seen, just like in American films, as you bring up. The whole running. I think the movie The Saint with Val Kilmer, she goes running into the embassy, and the Marine guards grab her, and they ward off the Russians or something. And no, if you're running toward an embassy, they're probably going to have a problem with you doing that. The consular section, though, again, citizen services, usually what we call ACS in the American context, and the visa unit. There's a lot of misconceptions about that. A big one, the one I see very frequently out there is, if I get arrested abroad, the embassy is going to come down and help me out. No, they are not. They are going to come down and make sure you're not being abused, and they will do kind of a very, I hesitate to call it pro forma, but it's what it is. They come, make sure you're alive, and then they say, hey, here's a list of lawyers, figure it out.
Yeah.
That's about it. They may convey some communication back to a loved one or a contact back home, but that's about it. Another big one that's a big misconception is what's called repatriation. People go broke abroad, and they think, I just go down to my embassy and they'll repatriate me back to my home country.
Or give you some money.
They definitely don't like having that reputation at all, because they don't do that. Now, one thing I will say is during when the COVID thing started, they did, in the American context, go out of their way to provide certain kinds of loans and things to get back into the United States. And
Okay.
And they do some things like that. They do perform a real function in, again, where you've got a criminal complaint against you and you've been incarcerated. They come and make sure that you're not, completely being abused. But for example, here in Thailand, you're in Thailand. It's Thailand's laws. That's that. They're not going to interfere on your behalf or anything like that. A lot of that is just fiction.
Now, a question without notice. The former king, King Bhumibol Adulyadej, was actually born in the US.
Right.
My understanding was that US citizens, when they register a business, that they had some additional rights than people from other countries.
Well, that's not by dint of his birth, although there's certainly a cross-national affinity between the two countries because of that. That was just happenstance. But With regard to what's called the U.S.-Thai Treaty of Amity, yes, there is a major benefit granted to American citizens under the provisions of that treaty, and that was actually ratified. That was ratified here in Thailand by His Majesty King Rama IX. It was ratified by the U.S. Senate and I believe President Johnson in 1966. That was actually an amendment to a treaty that goes back to 1833. So it's, and I believe, and I may be, I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I believe Thailand and America have the longest continuous alliance in Asia of any American contact in Asia. But yes, the big benefit to Americans under the treaty is what's called national treatment. So an American company that's certified here in Thailand, that company, once certified, is granted national treatment under the treaty, so it's treated as if it was a Thai company. So if it's 100% American shareholder owned, it's considered as if it was Thai. The Foreign Business Act does not apply. There are caveats to that.
Of course.
But for the most part, it's a very major benefit compared to other nationalities.
I'd be also suggesting if you are going to be running with speed towards an embassy gate, that you, one, have your passport held well in front of you, probably with a spotlight on it, and also a flak jacket.
Yes.
Because they're not going to be very happy about anybody running at speed towards the gate.
Perhaps the best advice is to not put yourself in a position where you need to be running at speed
Even
toward
better.
an embassy. That's probably the best way to put it.
And if you do end up in jail, you may need a lawyer. That could be Ben Hart from Integrity Legal, who's also got his own website where he does from time to time wax lyrical about local issues. Sure. You can have a look at that at Integrity Legal. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thanks for joining us on Lawyers, Guns and Money.